يا رسول الله وعلى ابن عمك أمير المؤمنين صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أبا محمد أيها الحسن الزكي الناصح الأمين وعلى أخيك أبي عبد الله الحسين ما خاب من تمسك بكم سادة reconciliation agreement with Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, barring the fact that he is the Prophet's grandson, barring the fact that he is what? Amir al-Mu'mineen's firstborn, Ruhi lahu al-Fida, and Lady Zahra alayhim wassalam. All of this, brothers and sisters, is a reminder to us. Don't say you love the Ahlul Bayt if you actually don't give a reason why you love the Ahlul Bayt. Don't say you love them if you don't know why you love them. Otherwise, your love is not genuine. How many people here appreciate the fact when someone says to them, a significant other, be them a relationship or a family member, that why do you love me? Just cause. That's not valid. That's not significant. That's not important. That's disingenuous. Then when we are told to love Ahlul Bayt, give me the reasons why. Imam al-Mujtaba alayhi salam, we should be listing archives. From this, inshallah ta'ala, a greater appreciation of the Imam, let us look at this in a three-stage process tonight. Who is Hassan? One observation. He is the first, and this is a mind-boggling, by the way, observation. Many of us have overlooked this. He is the first to be called Hassan. One would imagine those Arab in the 7th century Arabian Peninsula, you couldn't think of a more beautiful name than the names you were given to your children. Like the name Al-Hassan, for example. Hassanul Khalq, the most goodness, righteousness, benevolent. This name Hassan is one of the most beautiful names. It flows even beautiful on the tongue. He was the first to be given that name. From the first moment we observe that his name is a mu'jiza, a miracle. It is truly a miracle. Imagine you have an entire heritage of tribes. None of them could have thought of a name like the name Hassan. Goodness, righteousness. That in of itself is God choosing something. Again, what's his title? Mujtaba. فَاجْتَبَاهُ رَبُّهُ فَجَعَلَهُ مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ. This is in reference to Rasulullah, of course. And what does Rasulullah say regarding his relationship with his firstborn? Many of us will say it to his secondborn. حُسَيْنٌ مِنِّي وَأَنَا مِنْ حُسَيْنٍ أحسنت. But why did you forget the hadith that is accepted and mutawatir? حَسَنٌ مِنِّي وَأَنَا مِنَ الْحَسَنِ. We forgot about that. Like I said, the slogans we make today, live like Ali, die like Hussein. What about think wise like Al-Mujtaba, like Imam Al-Hassan alayhi salam? His entire name is a manifestation of his existence, goodness. Allah chose him, hence his name, for a purpose in this life. The best way to examine that, brothers and sisters, is to see his stages. And there are 3 stages, approximately. Stage 1 of the Imam and his chosen purpose is his life with the Holy Prophet of Islam, up until his martyrdom, sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Stage 2 is his life under his father, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Stage 3 is his life as the Imam post the martyrdom of Ali ibn Abi Talib. You notice a beautiful pattern emerge, brothers and sisters, like no other. Imam al-Mujtaba, one of the best ways we can start viewing him, Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, is a foundation builder. You are talking about a society whose heritage was built on the stronger eating the smaller. Racism, sexism, stereotypical behavior. The old would be disrespected. The strong would be the one that would have. Then you find people who would give superiority to Arab superiority. You would find that blatant racism was completely justified to the degree that you would even notice taxes were given to people who were more related to the Arab nations at the time than those who were even from Arab heritage themselves. So you found people, for example, who would be considered Persian, they would be taxed a lot less than the Arab. But you found people who were from Abyssinia or Ethiopia, Africa, who would be taxed more than the Persians. And this even did not stop during the time of the Khulafa itself. And we especially notice this in the tenure of the second Khalifa, Umar ibn al-Khattab, that there was a taxation. It doesn't matter if you're Muslim. Your ethnicity is indicative of how much you will be taxed. And I understand people deal with taxes all the time here. The size of your house, the land, that will be what we use to calculate how much you'll be taxed. Not your race and ethnicity. You're talking about that group of people. This same group of people, I just imagine there was this one moment, one day, I was a girl that was walking. We can read works like Tariq Dimashq that mention this. That a girl, a young teenager, as made clear by the descriptions, she was walking through the alleys of Mecca, the city of Mecca. Suddenly, she passed by a door. The description of the hadith gives us these details. A door from one of the houses. Immediately, imagine this, immediately the door swings open and this tall man, him in his hand, grabs her and brings her inside. His house, locks the door. Her family is going crazy. She is screaming and no one can do anything because he's the stronger one. They went to Rasulullah. They said, Ya Rasulullah, this happened. Our girl is just taken like that. What police, what security, nothing's going to work. Because in that society, you need to have tribal association. And that individual, that horrible man, happened to be associated with a very powerful, prominent tribe. And so Rasulullah came, knocked on the door, was able to actually speak to the man, hey, come to your senses. You can't just kidnap people like that. And then they were able to bring back that poor individual. This was the society you're dealing with. Imam Hassan alayhi salam, Rasulullah used him as a foundation maker and establisher. If you will not see the goodness in others, I will show you the goodness in my family. Let that spread and plant the seed in your hearts and minds. So what does Rasulullah do with Imam al-Hassan? Use him as an example and a model. This would be the first time in centuries where you see a man, notice, where you see a man kissing his grandchildren. The first time in centuries. To the point where a man by the name of Al-Agra, a bald-headed man, I guess that's his name, I don't know why. Again, these are the weird names you're dealing with. When you have Al-Hassan, but you go to Al-Agra. Al-Agra, this guy comes and he says, Ya Rasulullah, I see you kissing your grandson. He says, and I love my grandson, of course. He says, but I have 10 sons and I don't kiss one of them. To which Rasulullah says, من لم يرحم المخلوق لم يرحمه الخالق. You have to show mercy to the creation. In addition, moreover, your own children, then Allah will show mercy to you. Rasulullah would use Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. He was chosen, mujtaba, chosen for this exact reason. What happens to people who are chosen by Allah? The Quran said it. فَاجْتَبَاهُ رَبَّهُ وَجَعَلَهُ مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ فَجَعَلَهُ مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ. When Allah chooses someone, they have to be pure people. And so by virtue of Imam al-Hassan, known as the chosen one by Rabb al-Alameen, because this ayah is referencing Rasulullah. But then Rasulullah also, don't forget, said Hassan is from me and I am from him. May Allah love the one who loves him. Imam al-Hassan is from the Salihin. He is grown into this atmosphere where you find the hatred, the fear, the vitriol and pure racism rampant in society. In the 15th of the holy month of Ramadan, in the 3rd year after Hijrah, and his first experiences when his eyes open, salamullahi alayh, is that he sees his family constantly going back from war to the house, back to the city, back to the field. This was his first experience. The battle of Badr had just finished. Then immediately the battle of Uhud began, followed by Khandaq, and he's growing up in this atmosphere, seeing that it's normal. My father has to always leave bloodied and battered and returning. The narration says Lady Zahra, after the battle of Uhud, she cured over 71 injuries on the body of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. And this was something he grew up seeing and witnessing. This had an effect on the young Imam al-Hassan, such that he saw that my family is putting their life on the line for this message called Islam. Now, we are not of the belief, and I need to make that clear, that the Ahlul Bayt go through a development cycle, where they first didn't know, now they have more knowledge, then they have some more enlightenment. This is with respect to the 14 Ma'sumeen. This is in our Aqidah and theology. However, Imam al-Mujtaba sees this and this has an emotional effect on him indeed. Well, Ahlul Bayt are not robots. The Quran says what regarding Rasulullah? قَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْكُمْ. It's from you. He is from among you. So he's not a robot or an angel. He has emotional faculties. He gets hurt, he cries. Imam al-Mujtaba cries at this sight, subhanallah, such that it would hurt Rasulullah's heart to see him in that state. So what would he do? Constantly embrace him. He built the foundation in a society that never saw love and family relation as something normal. In fact, they saw it as effeminate. That's not something you do with your children as a man. You don't embrace and kiss. If anything, we keep that with the women and their children. Us, we have to set an example. Rasulullah said, no, if you won't listen to my words about this, I'll be the example. Imam al-Mujtaba was a foundation builder for proper family relations. He was used in that manner. Then we notice Imam al-Mujtaba being present in the most significant events in Islamic history when the ayat of the Quran would be revealed. You would find that Rasulullah, before Imam Hussein was born, because they are 1 year apart, Salamullahi alayhima. When Rasulullah only had Imam al-Hassan, at that 1 year age, he would carry him on his right shoulder and he would stand up. A gesture of love, this grandfather loving his grandson. Of course, the hadith by the Prophet is very clear that a grandparent has to show more love to their grandchildren than their children now. That is not to say, of course, Rasulullah has no more love for his family, of course, but as the etiquette of the family structure and dynamic, that's why grandparents absolutely adore their children, such that if they see them semi-hungry, they think they're starving and dying and about to die from starvation. Rasulullah shows that this is my boy, and so he carries him, and he is Khatamun Nabiyyin. The majesty of the word majesty is him, yet he is playing with him publicly like this. He takes him to the masjid, the ayat are revealed down to Rasulullah. Rasulullah begins to preach. Imam Hassan is on his shoulder. When Rasulullah, the ahadith make mention, would sit on the pulpit, the minbar, he would sit, of course the child, Salamullahi alayhi, has to go on the lap now. So he would cradle him as he is preaching. He is talking. Allah has revealed to me the following verses. This young Hassan is hearing them at about 1 year of age. When Imam al-Hussein was born, he would do both. On the right, Imam Hassan, on the left, Imam al-Hussein. Then he would take them to the masjid, and now he has both of them on his laps. And then he would begin preaching the ayat. One day, Rasulullah preached, Imam Hassan finished, hearing the Prophet say his speech, he came down the minbar, he went to the house of Father and Amir al-Mu'mineen. Sayyida Zahra asked him, Ya Bunay, what did Rasulullah preach today? And then he would begin reading the ayat that he heard from Rasulullah. Imam al-Hassan is reading these ayat. Sayyida Zahra has them memorized. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen is in attendance when Rasulullah is giving his speech. Imam Ali goes home. Sayyida Zahra begins to tell him what Rasulullah says via through Imam al-Hassan. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Ya Zahra, how did you know that Rasulullah said this? She would say, our son Hassan hears and memorizes. He comes and he tells me them. Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib says, I want to be there next time he begins to say what he hears from Rasulullah. I want to test him. If I show him that I want to test him, he'll be probably anxious. A test is not easy, especially if the teacher is Imam Ali and he's testing you. Oh my goodness. So he's like, how about I hide in the house, I'll stay in a different room. When he comes, I will be away and I'll just listen. I want to see if he got what Rasulullah said accurately, because I was also there. So the next day comes, Rasulullah speaks, the ayat are revealed. Imam Hassan rushes to Sayyidah Zahra. Amir al-Mu'mineen is near but not present. So he doesn't know that he's around. She begins to ask him, what did Rasulullah teach today, Habibi? He begins to say, Ya Ummah, qalla bayani wa kalla lisani la'alla sayyidan yar'ani. Beautiful words, O mother. My speech will be very little. Qalla, qalil, bayani. وَكَلَّ لِسَانِي, and my tongue is now a little bit heavy. I'm just describing what I feel right now. Maybe لَعَلَّ سَيِّدًا يَرْعَانِي. It is as if my father and leader is listening in on me right now. I feel a bit shy that Amir al-Mu'mineen is present, such that I am now going to repeat what I heard and he also heard. So, mother, it's going to be a bit challenging to do so. In that moment, Amir al-Mu'mineen walks in with a big smile on his face, embraces his son, kisses him and shows him the love, says to him, don't be shy or worried, let us hear. And word by word, Imam Hassan repeats the entire khutbah of Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Rasulullah showed us that in such a backward society, he begins to plant the foundations of family structure and dynamics, proper dynamics, but using Imam Hassan alayhi salam. Then later on, he does the same exact when Rasulullah begins to show society who Imam Hassan means to them and the Ummah theologically. Because there's one aspect, and that's a grandfather loving his grandchild. But don't forget, this is not any grandfather. He's not affected by hawa. وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. He does not get affected by whim and air and emotion, just speaks like nonsensical terms and words. What he says, وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ. He is wahi. Huwa, not his speech. Huwa. He is speaking revelation, not that he is revelation. So his touch, his blink, his expressions, his noise, anything he does is Allah's commandment. So now what he is doing isn't just pure, exclusive grandfather emotion. Aqa'id kick in. Theology kicks in. So what does he begin to do? Sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. He starts showing society. Al-Hassan wal-Hussein Sayyidai Shabab Ahlul Jannah. This, many have decided to interpret it as a lovely gesture and nothing more. La, this has aqa'id and theology laced all across it, brothers and sisters. When he says that Imams Hassan and Hussein are the masters of the youth of paradise, that is to say, let's keep learning about Jannah. We discover paradise is all youth. Meaning, by default, they are the masters of everyone there is. Now, the Quran starts to also make things more beautiful and clear here. It says, وَإِنَّ الدَّارَ الْآخِرَةَ لَهِيَ الْحَيَوَانِ. And that the afterlife, the next home, your next home will be the afterlife. It is true living and life. لَهِيَ الْحَيَوَانِ. So if Hassan and Hussein are the masters of the youth of the next life, what does that make them here, subhanallah? If that's real living, then this semi-living, what does that make them, subhanallah? There we go, now we have more theological connotations associated to these young boys. In addition to that, he begins to say something profound and absolutely remarkable. This hadith is narrated more in the non-Shia resources than it is in our material. It's narrated in passing in our material, but it's narrated in plentiful amounts in the non-Shia work and text. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله لو كان العقل رجلا لكان الحسن. If logic and reason was a man, it would be Hassan ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. If logic was manifested into a human being, it's him. What does this all show you being used as a precedent? That keep in mind his role is significant. Some things in the future might come about. Always remember what I say to you regarding him. These are lessons for you. That if logic and reason is a human being, you might be in a situation where you see Imam Hassan do something and you're like, what was that for? I don't think that maybe was the wisest of all decisions. Remember, if wisdom was a man, it's him. In addition to that, he says something here that we always repeat, but I wish more would focus on with detail. He says that Al-Hassani wal-Hussein imaman qama aw qa'ida. That Imams Hassan and Hussein are imams, whether they are standing or sitting. This many have given bizarre tafasir and explanations regarding. That they are wonderful people, whether they actually stand or sit. Well, that's a waste of words. Stand or sit, that doesn't mean anything. They're existing. Standing or sitting, why does that have any reason to consider? This is to mean whether it's their role or not, they are imams. What does that mean? Because in one time period, you can have multiple imams of Ahlul Bayt alive. Active and inactive. Whether they are inactive or active, what they do means they are still imams for you. Listen to what they say. So you have Harun and Musa. So just because Musa is the major imam, the active imam, and Harun is the inactive imam, that I don't listen to anything Harun gives me as advice when Musa goes to Mount Sinai and Harun is behind, they can just look at him and say, but he's the major imam, we don't have to. No. Imaman qama or qa'ida. Because later on you will see that these are 4 imams alive in one situation. Rasulullah, is he not the imam of the ummah, the leader of the ummah? Amir al-Mu'mineen, Al-Hassan al-Hussein, all alive. Which one do I listen to? Rasulullah, but also all of them. Because they are imams, whether they're active or inactive. Qama or qa'ida. Then you find Imam al-Mujtaba's life in that phase 2 situation, where he sees that he is still being used, and rightfully so, as a foundation maker, but this time not by Rasulullah, by the Imam that succeeded Rasulullah, Amir al-Mu'mineen. Because he still has Imams above him, they still use Imam al-Hassan as a foundation maker. How so? Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, in the famous war known as Jamal, the battle of the camel that happened in Basra, Iraq. And this battle was an unfortunate battle because it had family members of the Prophet going neck at neck. You found a weird situation where the followers of the opposition, they took refuge by the camel that was being led in the war. And so the wife of the Prophet, who was the opposition side, she was on a very big camel, the hadith make mention. In fact, they describe it as a winter camel almost. Have you seen sometimes that, well, many people may not even observe, that camels are primarily found in the desert, but then you find in the Silk Road in the Middle East that leads to China, there are paths where it crosses mountains. There are certain species of animals there, they have a big fur to them. This camel was like that, so it had more, one may say even gravitas, and it was reddish in color. And so it had this like presence in the field where it really was a symbol. And so she was sitting on this, and it acted as the symbolic source of morality for their soldiers. Basically, if the camel stands, we fight. So now what is the objective? We have to get rid of the camel. Some may say, well, what's the animal's fault? It's used as a source of inspiration to fight innocent people. And that war was such an unfortunate war. 10,000 Muslims lost their lives. I remember one man says to the leader of that side, says to her, Ya al-Mu'mineen, what is the ruling of a mother who kills her child? She says, hellfire. A mom can never kill her child. And what about a mom that killed 10,000 of her children? SubhanAllah. In any case, now the agenda is let's go after that camel. It's like the head of the snake. Control it, control everything else. Suddenly, people are rushing to get to it, but they know that this is the plan, so they begin to make multiple levels of strong men surrounding that camel. And none of them can penetrate it to get to it. Now the goal isn't to kill the rider of the camel, it's just to kill the camel. And so they're like, let's send the strongest, the fastest horses, go through that wall of men and just get to the camel. And they're like, we can't, it's too difficult. These are rows of men, and these were handpicked by her. They are the tallest of guys. So they're tall, I don't know, maybe let's say like 6'7". They're big, They have the sharpest weapons and they're just not going to budge, and there are 3 rows of them. How do you think you're going to get to that? Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib sends his son, Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah. Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah is a remarkable figure. We also later see his strength in the Battle of Siffin, the next war that happened after that, against Muawiyah in Sham. Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah, just a quick description. He was known literally for his strength. Not too surprising. I mean, his dad is literally called Qali' Bab Khaybar, the guy that ripped up the gate of Khaybar with one hand. And so the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But Muhammad ibn Hanafiyyah, one day they say there was a man who was a knucklehead. He caused a lot of problems in the city of Medina. He was just harassing people. So he took it on his own accord to tie up and restrain this man one day. Okay? This is Imam Ali's son, Muhammad ibn Hanafiyyah, from a wife known as Khawla bin Ja'far al-Hanafi. So this Muhammad, he tied up this guy, but he couldn't find rope to tie him against a tree. They say in the hadith, he used a metal pole. Like, I don't know, let's bring your attention to one of these poles right here. He tied him using a pole. Think of like the toughest bodybuilder. He's tying a guy using metal, and he restrained him with that. So he's tough. Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah, he says, I'll take care of it. He rushes through the wall of these lances of men to get to that camel. He couldn't do it. He comes back panting. He's tired. He's like, Father, this is difficult. These are the hand-selected, top-quality men. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen says to Ya Muhammad, watch and observe. Hassan, you go. Imam Hassan alayhi salam does the deed. Goes through them, literally splits through all of these 3 levels of men. He is the one that brought down that camel, that symbolic morale for all these individuals to stay fighting. Then he returns back to his father, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. Imam Ali looks at his son, then he looks at Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah, and he sees his head down like this, shy. Imam Ali looks at him and he says, I know what you're feeling. Don't worry about it. I sent you, you couldn't do it. I sent him, he did it. Don't worry. There's a difference between you and him. Muhammad says what? He says, you're the son of Ali. That's what? He's the son of Muhammad. And he's able to accomplish what you can't accomplish. He is my hand, you are the eye. And it's the job of the hand to defend the eye at some times. He repeats this in Siffin, where he sends Muhammad to fight, but Al-Hassan stays behind. He says, why do you send me, but you bring him back? He says, now you're the hand and he's the eye. It's the job of the hand to protect the eye. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen started using Imam al-Mujtaba as this example. Why? There will be allegations leveled against Imam al-Hassan through empires, scholars, and lay individuals. I personally have heard these accusations from people who are not really learned, but they'll easily say that I know Imam Hassan was a really not necessarily the bravest of people. Why would you say that? Well, that's what we were told. The scholar, the recipient of the scholar's knowledge, an establishment that worked tooth and thin to lower from the status, particularly Bani al-Abbas, not even Bani Umayyah, Bani al-Abbas, the cousins of the Ahlul Bayt, they worked tooth and nail to lower from that status. So there you see Amir al-Mu'mineen sending, Imam Ali himself can just go, but he sends Imam al-Hassan. He does that for a purpose. I want to lay the foundation. My Ahlul Bayt, they're not cowards, as you might assume one day them to be. So he makes Imam Hassan as that example, as he was an example multiple times during the life of the Holy Prophet of Islam. Then, when Imam Hassan sees that his father, Amir al-Mu'mineen, has now been martyred, what does he do? He begins to give a sermon. Now you see the sermons of Imam al-Hassan emerge. And this is a beautiful observation. During the life of the Holy Prophet of Islam, many will find this rather thought-provoking. Did you know that in the life of the Holy Prophet, the 23 years of spreading Islam, how many khutub, sermons, did Imam Ali have? How many? And Imam Ali is the most baligh, the most eloquent and articulate. We know this to be a very true fact. Just read the nahj of what? Balagha, the path of eloquence. 0 sermons. In that 23 years, 0. Why? Who are you to speak when your teacher's there? Rasulullah leaves, Imam Ali begins erupting with a renaissance of ilm like you've never seen before. Suddenly, when Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen returns back to his Lord, we find Imam al-Mujtaba doing the exact same thing, with the exceptions when Imam Ali advises him and orders him, now speak. Because we found in the Battle of Jamal, the opposition doing la'na on Imam Ali. And so Imam Hassan came and counteract by saying, why do you do la'na on the one? أَذْهَبَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ. He would begin reminding them of this. These are exemptions because Imam Ali told him to. When Amir al-Mu'mineen returns back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we saw Imam al-Hassan giving so many du'as. How many of us can tell any du'a from Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam? A few, just a few. Not many, unfortunately. What about the way he describes Allah? These are not rogue ahadith you have to search far and wide. In al-Kafi of Shaykh al-Kulayni. You can look at any of our material, so many sermons of Imam al-Mujtaba, but very few are recorded in history, brothers and sisters, sadly. And this is not necessarily our fault at times. This is the work, the hard work of empires and establishments and caliphates and so on and so forth. That's why we are going to change that, inshallah ta'ala. We found Imam al-Mujtaba starting to give speeches. But who's on the sideline relatively right now, watching and observing, is now being used as the foundation maker, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Because then you see Imam al-Hassan using him as an example. The roles have now moved on to him. This is exactly how we should look at the Ahlul Bayt, particularly Imam al-Mujtaba, the one Allah has chosen by God for what? To set the foundation. From the very moment of his life, his name was a miracle, brothers and sisters. Now when the rule and the activeness of his responsibilities as an imam begin, you see him speaking, debating Romans. These debates, by the way, they're all recorded. Debated Romans. He has a debate, we all know him, with Yazid ibn Muawiyah. Yazid sits with him and he sits with Imam al-Hassan and he begins debating him. And Yazid begins to slander Imam al-Hassan, and Imam al-Hassan begins to give the most beautiful of replies. Replies that we've seen, inshallah ta'ala, in the upcoming nights. We will go into more depth with them. We then move on to the life of Imam al-Mujtaba in his time period. Now, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen left this world in exactly the 40th year after Hijrah. Imam al-Mujtaba is Imam for these 10 remaining years, as his Shahada is in the 50th year after Hijrah. So for these 10 years, you found, brothers and sisters, a massive movement that Imam al-Mujtaba had to make sure he was on top of. That is why later on we notice, and we will get to this in the upcoming nights, the agreement he made with Muawiyah, he wrote the terms. Having graduated in political science, they will tell you that any smart politician, just for politician purposes, political purposes, the one who writes the terms not agrees to terms that are already written. And this is an indication of his aql. Because there are people in life, ilmuhu akthar min aqlih. They have more knowledge than they are wise. You see many people, they'll repeat. Many young people will ask this, by the way. Are you sure we are on the right path? Look at non-Muslims. Look how intelligent they are, for example. Look at, for example, scientists. Why are most of these scientists atheists? Look at these researchers. Look at that guy with his high IQ. If they were so smart, they should have found Islam if Islam was lahaq. Well, now you have to make a difference between knowledge, like a parrot can have knowledge, it can remember and repeat words, versus wisdom. And Rasulullah did not say, لو كان العلم رجلا. If knowledge was an individual, which is not to say Imam al-Mujtaba obviously is not knowledgeable, but what is greater than knowledge is wisdom. It's how you implement ilm, wisdom. Al-aqlu rajulan لكان الحسن ibn Ali alayhi salam. Imam al-Mujtaba, we notice in his life there are many times you can say it's very difficult. It's not easy. It's very hard on the Imam. But the most difficult time of the Imam's life was actually not his own martyrdom, wasn't that. Nor was it losing his father, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. As soon as Imam Ali, by the way, is martyred, you see Imam Hassan give this speech. Today, Ya ayyuhan nas, we lost a man. Mikael would be to his left, Jibreel would be to his right when he would fight. The most beautiful, I encourage you all to read the khutbah of Imam al-Hassan when Imam Ali dies. It's a very wonderful sermon. Begins right as soon as Imam Ali dies. But the most difficult of these moments to this beloved Imam of Ahlul Bayt, alayhi salam, who left this world when he was around the age of 47, was when Rasulullah died. This is mentioned by him, alayhi salam, that there was nothing more heavy on my heart like the day when we lost the Holy Prophet of Islam. That was the most difficult and complicated moment in his life. Because he, alayhi salam, is a narrator of that event. Imam al-Hassan narrated hundreds of traditions, by the way. Unfortunately, many works from the non-Shia material will not narrate many from Imam al-Hassan. In fact, there isn't a single hadith by Imam al-Hassan from Sahih al-Bukhari. Not one hadith. Not one single hadith. You have many ahadith from other individuals, but not a single hadith from Imam al-Hassan, as if he never narrated a hadith. In the study of academia and primary sources, we go back to original material and we see he has hundreds of ahadith. Hundreds. Why not a single one in certain canonized texts? And this is exactly what we mean when we say the countless work of empires. The countless work of those in charge deciding what to put and what not to put. Who pays the price of this today? Us, we do. We pay the price of this. I'll give you an example. In the famous work known as the Muwatta of Imam Malik ibn Anas, who was a scholar, a scholar with all his intellect. He was a judge under the time of Abu Ja'far al-Mansur al-Diwaniqi, the same caliph that was responsible for the killing of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq. So at that time, Imam Malik bin Anas, who now is known as the Imam of the Maliki school of thought, this individual has the Muwatta of Malik. The Muwatta is a book that has thousands of ahadith. It was ordered by the Khalifa, hey, write a constitution. This will be the first Islamic Dastur, constitution. And we want it to be easy for people to understand. وَوَطِّئْهُ لِلنَّاسِ. Hence why the name. Make it easy for people to understand. Hence why the name Muwatta of the scholar Malik. Oh, by the way, don't put a single hadith from Ali ibn Abi Talib. Don't, not a single one. I don't want a single one. This is a book you're supposed to live by. Not a single hadith from Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. That's preposterous. The man who, when he was born, his first sight in life was Rasulullah's eyes. He held on to him. And the moment Rasulullah left this world, he was in the hands of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. Not one hadith. The work of empires. And my goodness, they worked so hard to ruin one Imam's legacy. And I say this Imam more than any, it's Imam al-Hassan. Imam al-Hassan. Not Imam al-Hussein. Not even Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. For even the 80 years they did la'an on him. 80 years, the individual that got the blunt end, the shorter end, is Imam Hassan alayhi salam. There was a hatred for him. Why? There was something he did. When you fight, it's a different deal than when you sign something. It's not to say that fighting is less significant than making reconciliatory decisions like Imam Hassan did with, for example, Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. No, as compared to Imam al-Hussein. But now, people can see that there was a plot that has been planned and thought of. Because Imam Hassan, what did he do? He set the foundation this time for Imam al-Hussein. Karbala would not have happened if it was not for the sacrifice of Imam al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. Everything you love and know about Imam al-Hussein, you owe it to Imam al-Hassan salamullahi alayhi. Because Imam al-Hussein saw Yazid being oppressive in both private and public. He was known as the Khammar, يَلَعَبُ بِالْفُهُودِ وَالْقُرُودِ. He was known as that womanizer, drinker. In public he would do it. So people can look at Yazid ibn Muawiyah and say, clearly he's not an ideal Muslim. But it's not that easy when you see Muawiyah in public building masajid, in public having a long beard, in public with the tasbih. Because there are many people, most people, their eyes, their aql is in their eyes. عيونهم بعقولهم that their thought and brain is in their eyes. What they see is what they know. I don't need to care, I don't need to investigate, no bahath, no tahqiq, nothing. You are wonderful. Khal al-Mu'mineen, for example, as he was known as. You are the inaugurator of many wonderful masajid. Look at Masjid al-Amawi right now in Damascus. Big, wonderful establishment, worshipping Allah inside it, established by many people. Many masajid, the one who wrote the Quran. These are all public efforts. Come look at private what's going on. It's harder to bring down a hypocrite than it is to bring down an individual who's a fasiq. It's so easy to bring down a fasiq. You know what you have to do to bring down someone that is vile just by default? Just say, look at them. Look at what they're doing. Easy, we're done. End of story. How about a man that when he prays, he says, Allahumma aghfir li. His back is bent and broken from how much he's doing sujood in public. You need a wise man to bring him down. That's where Imam al-Mujtaba came and addressed this destruction by using his words here. This is a thawra, not necessarily Husayniyya. It is Husayniyya because kulluhum nurun wahid, but this is what we refer to as the thawra al-Hasaniyya. Imam al-Hassan brought down an entire establishment that today many people would be revering had it not been through his efforts. That's the most difficult thing to accomplish. Even his own followers and friends looked at him and said, how could you do that? You made an agreement with him. Number one, people worship him because of what he does. You have to expose him. He says, I know he will be exposed because when I am gone, he will not live by the terms. As a result, he will be exposed. Look at the foresight of Imam al-Mujtaba. As soon as Imam al-Mujtaba left, he never maintained the terms that he laid out. As a result, exposing him. This requires what? Aqil Jabbar. A very strong intellect and wisdom. Imam al-Mujtaba displayed that for us. That's very hard to do, by the way. It's absolutely complicated to do. Despite this, he doesn't say this was the most difficult. Nor even those final moments of Imam al-Hassan's life are the most difficult. He mentions that the most difficult moment, not when Amir al-Mu'mineen left, not when Sayyidah Zahra left, when we left Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Imam al-Hassan every day, as soon as Rasulullah left this world, every single day, if he was in Medina, he would visit Rasulullah's qabr and grave. Every single Hajj, he would do the Hajj of Rasulullah about over 25 times. He went to Hajj on his feet when everyone else was on their camels and horses, as Rasulullah did himself. He embodied everything Rasulullah showed and laid forth. And when he lost Rasulullah, you've never seen a person more broken than Imam Hassan alayhi salam. This was his grandfather, and this was the same son that made Rasulullah a grandfather. There's a family love, but what about when there's a theological love, brothers and sisters? That's heavy. That's not when the family begins to cry. That's when this ummah should cry. Because your aqeedah is contingent on this man, on this young boy. And many people, their accusations they level against him is, yes, his affection to Rasulullah was temporary as he was a young boy. But he really doesn't have much merit as far as the narrations, the times he participated in the war with the Prophet, and so forth. Because how old was Imam al-Mujtaba when Rasulullah died? 7 years old. About 7 years old. So his time with Rasulullah is short-lived. But a second with Rasulullah, brothers and sisters, is worth 100 years. What about a young man who Rasulullah, before his birth, he foreshadowed? In the hadith by Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari, who are the leaders after you, Ya Rasulullah? He mentions all by name, all by name. That's where the name Al-Mujtaba comes from. He says, and then after my son and love and brother and Habibi, Ali is his son. Hassan, he is known as the chosen Al-Mujtaba. Before he was even born. In the hadith, famous narration by Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari. Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam says that one day, when my grandfather was very ill, me and my brother Hussein were observing, just watching what's going on. We see many people come in and out of the house. Many young children will tell you that when their family was not well, you find the paramedics come in the home and they're just watching. What are we doing? What's going on? One can imagine it's a similar situation like this. So many people coming and going. They were in the home of the Holy Prophet of Islam. It's their home in that famous Thursday, and people coming and going. And one day Rasulullah is angry. A man in his final moments shouldn't spend them angry and almost bursting out of anger. Get out of here, all of you. Then suddenly we see him saying, Id'uni habibi. Bring to me my love, my source of love. One person brought their father. Another person brought their uncle. Another person brought others. And Rasulullah would say, not you. Id'uni habibi. Bring me my love. They came, Imam al-Mujtaba makes mention, I saw my mother Fatima. Suddenly the companions and Sahaba came up to her, and he sees them asking her questions, and she began to reply, I know who his love is, and you know too. It's Ali ibn Abi Talib. Go and bring him to Rasulullah when he says, bring me my love. Imam al-Mujtaba sees that his father goes to Rasulullah and he is on his bed. Those final moments to any grandfather and grandchild are the most difficult, subhanAllah. He begins to say that I saw him and my dad standing near each other, but Rasulullah was laying on the bed. Imam Hassan couldn't handle it. He ran straight to the Holy Prophet of Islam. No more formalities. These all go away now. He goes straight to the Holy Prophet of Islam, and to his side is Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. They immediately jump straight to the chest of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. And in those final moments, you see the Holy Prophet of Islam cradling them, embracing them. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen puts his hand on the backs of his children and he wants to remove them. Rasulullah looks at Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen and he says, leave them. I want them near me and I need them by my side. I want to smell them and let them smell me. And I want to embrace them and let them embrace me. Because they indeed, by Allah, know that these moments will be the final moments. And this is the most beautiful relationship you will ever see a grandfather have with his grandchildren. There was a time, I remember, one day Rasulullah, we mentioned that he would have Imam Hassan and Hussein here. And so one man said to Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, he looks at the Hassan and Hussein, he says to them, Ni'mal jamal jamalakuma. I don't know where he has akhlaq to say this. He said, you two young boys, what a blessed camel you have. You're riding on top of the Holy Prophet of Islam. What a blessed camel you have. And so the Prophet looks at the man and he says, بَلْ نِعْمَ الرَّاكِبَانِ هُمَا وَأَبُوهُمْ خَيْرٌ مِّنْهُمَا. But rather, what a blessed one I am to have them ride on top of me. I am blessed to have them. حسين مني وأنا من حسين وحسن مني. Let's say that more often. وأنا من حسن. In those moments, Rasulullah, you see, he cradles them. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen wants to remove them because he feels that this might be too much on the Holy Prophet. And this is the moment the Holy Prophet says, that Imam says, that this is the most difficult of the moments in my entire life. It wasn't when I lost my family, or it wasn't when I lost anything. It's when I lost Rasulullah. At that moment, brothers and sisters, you see the following moments and heartbreaking experience occur. Suddenly, Lady Zahra alayhi salam enters in the room. She sees Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen sitting by the head of Rasulullah, and she sees Al-Hassan wal-Hussein cradling the Prophet's chest, and all of a sudden you hear the knocks on the door. These 3 knocks happen. She ignores them because we're busy with the Holy Prophet in his final moments. Then she ignores them. They come back again. They are mourning their grandfather. They're mourning the Prophet of Islam. She ignores them. At that moment, they knock a 3rd time. Then Rasulullah says to Sayyida Zahra, Ya Fatima, go to that door. For it is indeed the one that separates life and death. It is Malikul Maut. He has now knocked that door. And by Allah, he will never do something like this, nor has he done it before. Sayyida Zahra goes to that door. She sees that there isn't anyone there. The angel comes to the Holy Prophet and he sees Hassan and Hussein crying over the chest of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Then he says, Assalamu alayk ya khatim al-nabiyyin. Do you give me permission to take your soul back to Allah? Or do you want to stay here with your family, ya Habibullah? Rasulullah has his children, Hassan and Hussein, on his chest. He looks towards the samawat and he says, Bal ila rafiq al-a'la, rather straight to the heavens and the greatest of companions, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But ya Malik al-Maut, before you take my soul, let me say these words to my family. He looks to Sayyidah Zahra. He begins to tell her that you will see much difficulty after me. Stay patient, Ya Ali, give me your hand. He takes the hand of Amir al-Mu'mineen and he places it on the hand of Zahra. As long as Amir al-Mu'mineen's with you and by your side, don't ever worry, Ya Fatima wa Ya Ali. After me in the mihrab of Kufa you will go, and you, my beloved Habibi Hassan, with the poison you will go, and you, Ya Hussein. Where do we have words to describe what will be of Hussein's fate in the land of Karbala? I imagine the angel watching Aba Abdullah crying and resting his blessed head on the chest of Rasulullah. But who was on the chest of Hussein in the land of Karbala? On that day, Zuhair ibn al-Qayn says to Aba Abdullah, he says, Fidatak nafsi هاديا مرضيا اليوم ألقى جدك النبيا. Today may my soul go ransom for you. I will meet your grandfather, the Prophet. The companion says to Aba Abdullah, but then he asks and says one more thing, Wa Hassanin, and your brother Imam Hassan, wal Murtada Aliya. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. فرج عنا يا Allah. Oh Allah, we ask you on behalf of the Shaheed in Medina to make us from his Zuwar, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, we ask you on behalf of Hassan al-Mujtaba to grant us the Shafa'ah of Imam al-Mujtaba. Ya Allah, we ask you to raise us with our Mahdi. Ya Allah, we ask you on behalf of all those who are sick to heal all of our sick ones. Ya Rabbal Alameen, on behalf of the one sick in Karbala, Allahumma inna nas'aluka wa nad'uk bismika al-aziz al-a'zam al-azz al-ajall al-akram. Ya Allah, 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 Ya Allah. Brothers and sisters, many actually have requested that today, being the first night of the Al-Layali Al-Hassaniya, the Imam Hassan nights, the Hassani nights, let us recite Surah Al-Fatiha for the sick members of our community. There was a brother that had made a special request. He says his mother isn't feeling too well, and we will keep that anonymous inshallah, but we can pray for her, for him, and for all of us. We all have marada, brothers and sisters. Let us pray for them by reciting the ayat 5 times of requesting Allah for assistance to those who are in distress. أَمَّا يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَ. All together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. All together. أَمَّا مضطر إذا دعا ويكشف السوء. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعا ويكشف السوء. أما يجيب أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه يكشف السوء اللهم اكشف السوء والبلاء عنا يا الله اللهم عجل بوليك الفرج اللهم المرضى المنظورين شافي وعافهم يا الله وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات والعلماء والشهداء. For all those who have requested, رحم الله من قال سورة المباركة الفاتحة. But before it, the loudest of your salawat.